His beautiful attorney forgot to hang up. The Korean mafia boss overheard her secret love. The conference room line clicked to what sounded like silence at 11:47 p.m. Naomi Chin slumped back in her leather chair, loosening the collar of her blouse, her fingers trembling from 3 hours of negotiating weapons shipment routes with Seoul's most untouchable crime lord. The kind of negotiation where one wrong clause could mean bodies in the Han River by sunrise. She thought the call had ended. She was wrong. God, I can't keep doing this, Naomi whispered to her paralegal Marcus, who'd stayed late with her. Her voice cracked in a way she never allowed during business hours. 3 years, Marcus. 3 years of midnight calls, coded language, and pretending my hands don't shake every time I hear his voice. Marcus leaned against the mahogany table. Then quit. Find a normal client who doesn't have 17 different government agencies trying to. I can't. The words came out strangled. Because I'm in love with him. The admission hung in the air like smoke. Every month, black roses arrive at my apartment. No card. No message. Just 13 roses, one for each year he's ruled this city's underworld, Naomi continued, her carefully constructed walls crumbling. He remembers I take my coffee with oat milk, not regular. He quotes Neruda when he thinks I'm not listening. Last week, he asked if my father's surgery went well. I never told him my father was sick, Marcus. She stood, pacing to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Seoul's glittering skyline. When we're alone, when he thinks the cameras are off, he looks at me like I'm something precious. Like I matter more than territory, more than power, more than. Her reflection stared back, exhausted and raw. But men like Kang Jae-won don't love women like me. They love control. They love what you can do for them. I'm his attorney, his fixer, his civilized face for legitimate business. That's all I'll ever be. What Naomi didn't know, what she couldn't know, was that on the other end of the line, Kang Jae-won sat in his penthouse office, his phone still connected, his knuckles white against the armrest of his chair. He'd heard every word. Every confession about the roses he'd sent specifically because he'd noticed a pressed black rose in her law school graduation photo. Every truth about the late-night calls where he'd kept her on the line long after business was concluded, just to hear her breathe. Every vulnerability she thought was secret. The most dangerous man in Seoul, the one who'd built an empire on silence and calculated violence, had just heard the woman he'd loved for 3 years confess she believed he could never love her back. His jaw clenched. His eyes darkened with something between fury and devastation. Sir, his second-in-command, Miho, stood in the doorway. The route approvals. Clear my schedule for tomorrow morning, Jae-won interrupted, his voice deadly calm. Send Miss Chin a message. My office. 9 a.m. Non-negotiable. Should I include a reason? Jae-won's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. No. Let her wonder. In approximately 9 hours, Naomi would walk into that office expecting a routine briefing. Instead, she would discover that the most powerful man in Seoul knew her deepest secret and had one of his own that would change everything. But she didn't know that yet. Before we dive deeper, subscribe and turn on notifications because this story is about to get intense. But to understand how a Harvard-educated corporate attorney ended up in love with a crime lord, we need to go back 3 years. Back to when Naomi Chin was a 28-year-old associate at Kim & Associates, drowning in student debt and desperate for a career breakthrough. She'd grown up in Atlanta, the daughter of Ghanaian immigrants who'd sacrificed everything for her education. Her mother cleaned houses. Her father worked double shifts at a warehouse. They'd sent her to the best schools, pushed her to be extraordinary. And she was top of her class at Harvard Law, fluent in Korean, English, and Chui. Sharp as a blade and twice as dangerous in a courtroom. But none of that mattered when the bills came due. $180,000 in student loans. Her father's medical expenses after his stroke. Her younger brother Kwame's tuition at Georgia Tech. She was drowning, and no one was throwing her a lifeline. Then Kang Jae-won walked into her law firm. She'd been working late again, reviewing contracts for a pharmaceutical merger when her senior partner called her into his office. The man sitting across from him wore a suit that cost more than her car, his presence filling the room like smoke. Dark eyes that missed nothing. Hands that looked capable of tenderness and terrible violence. Miss Chin, her partner had said, his voice tight with barely concealed fear, this is Kang Jaiwon. He requires legal representation for his various business interests. Naomi had looked at Jaiwon and known immediately what he was. She'd read the reports, the whispers, the way prosecutors' cases mysteriously fell apart, the politicians who suddenly changed their votes after private meetings. She should have said no. Instead, she'd met his gaze and asked, what kind of businesses? His lips had curved. The kind that pay very, very well. That first retainer had cleared her father's medical debt. The second had paid off half her loans. By the third, she was in too deep to climb out, and she wasn't sure she wanted to. Because something happened in those late-night meetings. Those negotiations that blurred into dawn. Those moments when it was just the two of them, the city asleep below, and he'd look at her like she was the only real thing in his manufactured world. He never touched her. Never crossed that line. But God, the way he looked at her sometimes made her forget how to breathe. Tell me about Ghana, he'd said one night, apropos of nothing. They'd been reviewing import documents, the legal kind, for once. Why? She'd been suspicious. Information was currency in his world. Because when you're tired, you speak Chui in your sleep during video calls. I want to understand what you're saying. She'd stared at him. You've been listening to me sleep? You fall asleep during late calls. I stay on the line to make sure you're safe. He'd said it like it was the most natural thing in the world. The nightmares stopped 3 months ago. I'm glad. She'd had no response to that. No defense against the casual intimacy of a man who noticed when her nightmares stopped. The roses started arriving shortly after. 13 black roses every month, delivered to her apartment at dawn. She'd researched the meaning, love, rebirth, the death of old ways and birth of new ones. She'd never asked if they were from him. She'd been too afraid of the answer. Her life had become a strange double existence. By day, she was a corporate attorney representing legitimate businesses, hotels, restaurants, real estate developments. By night, she negotiated with criminals, washed money through legal channels, and protected a man who could have her killed with a phone call. But he never threatened her. Never made her feel disposable. Instead, he'd promoted her. Made her lead counsel. Paid her a salary that let her buy her parents a house in Buckhead. Sent Kwame care packages during finals week, snacks from Korea, study guides, gift cards. How did you know it was finals week? She'd asked once. I pay attention to the people who matter. The people who matter. She'd replayed those words for weeks. And slowly, terrifyingly, she'd fallen in love with him. With the man who quoted Pablo Neruda during contract reviews. I love you without knowing how, or when, or from where. With a man who'd sent armed guards to her apartment building after a rival gang made threats in her neighborhood. Guards she'd never seen but knew were there. With a man who remembered her father's surgery date and sent flowers to the hospital with a card that read simply, he'll recover. I've made sure of it. She'd never asked what that meant. She'd been too grateful. But she'd also never let herself hope. Men like Kang Jaiwon didn't fall in love with their attorneys. They collected beautiful things, used loyal people, and discarded both when convenient. So she'd buried her feelings, professionalized every interaction, and pretended her heart didn't race every time his name appeared on her phone. Until last night, when exhaustion had finally cracked her armor, and she'd confessed everything to Marcus. Not knowing Jaiwon had heard it all. Naomi's phone buzzed at 6:47 a.m. with a message from an unknown number. My office. 9 a.m. Come alone. K. Her stomach dropped. She'd barely slept, replaying the late-night conversation with Marcus, trying to remember if she'd heard the disconnect tone. The more she thought about it, the less certain she became. She dressed carefully, a charcoal suit, minimal jewelry, her armor of professionalism. Whatever this meeting was, she'd face it with dignity. Jaiwon's building was in Gangnam, a sleek tower of black glass that housed both legitimate corporations and less legal operations. The top 3 floors belonged to him exclusively. Naomi had been there dozens of times, but today the elevator ride felt like a descent into judgment. His assistant, a severe woman named Mrs. Park, escorted her past the usual conference rooms to Jaiwon's private office, a space she'd only entered twice before. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Seoul. minimalist furniture, a bar that probably cost more than her law degree. And there, standing with his back to her, hands in his pockets, was Kong Jaiwon. "Sit," he said without turning around. She sat, her heart hammering. If this is about the shipment contracts, it's not. He turned, and the look in his eyes made her breath catch. Not anger. Something more dangerous. "When did you plan to tell me?" Her mind raced. "Tell you what? That you've been in love with me for 3 years. His voice was perfectly calm, perfectly controlled. "That you think I see you as nothing more than a useful tool. That you believe I could never feel the same way." The blood drained from her face. Oh God. The call. He'd heard everything. "I can explain," she started, but he raised a hand. "Don't." He crossed to his desk, pressed a button. Her voice filled the room, her confession to Marcus, every vulnerable word. When it ended, silence stretched like broken glass. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I was exhausted. I wasn't thinking clearly." "Which part are you apologizing for? Loving me or assuming I couldn't love you back?" She couldn't answer. Couldn't breathe. Jaiwon sat on the edge of his desk, close enough that she could smell his cologne, cedar, and something darker. "I'm going to tell you 3 things, Naomi. The first is that I've been in love with you since you refused to be intimidated by me during our first meeting. The second is that I've kept my distance because loving you means painting a target on your back, and I've spent 3 years convincing myself that keeping you at arm's length would keep you safe." Her eyes burned. "And the third?" His expression hardened. "The third is that your brother Kwame is in debt to the Jade Serpent Syndicate. $340,000 from gambling losses. They're planning to collect in 4 days, and collection means either he pays, or they sell him to a work camp in Southeast Asia where he'll spend the next decade in forced labor." The world tilted. "What?" "No, Kwame doesn't, he wouldn't. He's been gambling online for 2 years. Started small, got in deep, borrowed from the wrong people." Jaiwon's voice was clinical, detached. "I've had people monitoring your family since you started working for me. Standard protocol, knowing my attorney's vulnerabilities helps me protect them." Fury and terror warred in her chest. "You've been spying on my family?" "I've been protecting them. There's a difference." He stood, towering over her. "The Jade Serpents contacted me last week, thinking I'd be interested in taking over the debt since you work for me. I told them no. They assumed that meant you were just an employee, not someone I valued. They're moving forward with collection." Naomi's hands shook. Her baby brother. Her brilliant, stupid baby brother who'd been so stressed about his classes, his future. "I'll pay it," she said desperately. "I have savings, I can take loans. You don't have $340,000. And even if you did, they won't take money from you. They want blood or they want him. It's about reputation now." She stood, her legs unsteady. "Then what do I do?" "Please, Jaiwon, I'll do anything." "I know," he said quietly. "That's why I'm going to make you an offer." He walked to the bar, poured 2 glasses of whiskey she didn't remember requesting, handed her one. "I need a fiancé." She blinked. "What?" "My family has been pressuring me to marry for years. My grandmother is dying. She has maybe 6 months. She wants to see me settled before she goes. I've refused every match they've arranged because," he stopped, his jaw tight. "Because I only want one woman, and I convinced myself I couldn't have her." Understanding dawned slowly, impossibly. "You want me to pretend to be engaged to you? 6 months. Long enough for my grandmother to die believing I'll be happy. Public appearances, family dinners, the appearance of a relationship." He met her eyes. "In exchange, I'll pay Kwame's debt in full, destroy the records, and put him under my protection. The Jade Serpents won't touch him. Ever." "Why?" Her voice broke. "Why would you do this?" "Because I love you," he said simply. "And because you're right, men like me don't get happy endings. But maybe we can pretend for 6 months. Maybe that's enough." Naomi's mind spun. This was manipulation. Coercion. He'd known about Kwame's debt and waited until the perfect moment to leverage it. But Kwame was her baby brother. The one she'd protected since their father's stroke. The one she'd worked herself to exhaustion for. If she said no, he'd disappear into a labor camp, and she'd never see him again. "If I do this," she said slowly, "I have conditions." Something flickered in Jaiwon's eyes. "Respect, maybe." "Name them." "First, Kwame gets clean." You sent him to rehab for gambling addiction, paid in full. Second, this is strictly business, no crossing lines, no confusing reality with performance. Third, at the end of 6 months, I walk away and you let me go. No threats, no leverage, no looking back. Done, he said immediately. Too immediately. She didn't trust it. But what choice did she have? Then we have a deal. She downed the whiskey, letting it burn away the fear. When do we start? Jaiwin pulled a velvet box from his desk drawer. Inside was a ring, a black diamond surrounded by smaller white diamonds, elegant and unusual and somehow perfect. Right now, he said. We're having dinner with my family tonight. I'll pick you up at 6. He slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. Of course it did. He'd probably known her ring size for months. As his hand lingered on hers, warm and solid and dangerous, Naomi realized she'd just made a deal with the devil. She just wasn't sure which one of them would burn first. The first month was performance art. Dinner with Jaiwin's family, his grandmother, a tiny woman with eyes like steel who'd interrogated Naomi in rapid Korean, while Jaiwin translated with barely concealed amusement. His mother, elegant and cold, who'd asked pointed questions about Naomi's family background in a way that made her Ghanaian heritage feel like something to defend. His father, who barely looked up from his phone until Jaiwin mentioned Naomi's Harvard degree, then suddenly took interest. A corporate attorney, his father had said. Impressive. You represent my son's businesses. All of them, Naomi had replied, meeting his gaze. The legal ones, at least. Jaiwin's hand had found hers under the table, squeezed gently. A warning or support, she couldn't tell. But his grandmother had laughed, a sharp, delighted sound. I like her. She is fine. Marry her quickly before she realizes she's too good for you. Public appearances followed. Charity galas where photographers captured them dancing, her hand on his chest, his arm around her waist. Restaurant openings where he'd order dishes she loved without asking, where he'd lean close to whisper translations of conversations happening in rapid Seoul dialect, his breath warm against her ear. Shopping trips where he'd insist on buying her clothes, you need to look the part, he'd said, then proceeded to select dresses in colors she loved, styles that flattered her figure, as if he'd memorized the architecture of her body through 3 years of carefully not touching her. And the touching. God, the touching. His hand at the small of her back, guiding her through crowds. His fingers adjusting her necklace before photos, lingering at her collarbone. The way he'd pull her close when someone approached too aggressively, his body a shield, his voice dropping to that dangerous register, you're standing too close to my fiancé. At night, alone in her apartment, she'd stare at the black diamond ring and try to remember this was pretend. It was getting harder. The second month, things shifted. They attended a family gathering at his grandmother's estate, a sprawling traditional hammock with modern amenities hidden behind classical architecture. His cousins were there, his uncles, a constellation of relatives who watched Naomi with varying degrees of suspicion and curiosity. His grandmother pulled her aside after dinner. Walk with me, child. They strolled through the garden, past cherry trees just beginning to bloom. You love him, the old woman said. Not a question. Naomi's throat tightened. I'm his attorney. This arrangement is. Don't lie to an old woman. I've seen the way you look at him when you think no one's watching. I've also seen the way he looks at you, like you're oxygen, and he's been drowning. She stopped, turned to face Naomi. My grandson was 8 years old when his father brought him into the family business. Taught him that love is weakness, that everyone is either an asset or a threat. He's spent 35 years believing he's incapable of normal human connection. Why are you telling me this? Because you're the first person he's brought home who sees him as a man, not a monster. You're the first person who makes him smile like he used to before this life took everything soft out of him. Her grip was surprisingly strong. Don't let him push you away when this arrangement ends. He'll try. He'll convince himself it's for your protection. But the truth is, he's terrified that you'll see who he really is and run. I already know who he is. Then why haven't you run? Naomi didn't have an answer. That night, Jaiwin drove her home in silence. When they reached her building, he didn't immediately unlock the doors. My grandmother likes you, he said. She interrogated me about my intentions for 20 minutes. That's how she shows affection. A pause. What did she tell you? Naomi hesitated. That you smile differently around me. He turned to face her, and in the dim light of the car, he looked younger. Vulnerable. I do. You make me remember what it feels like to be human instead of just functional. Her breath caught. Jaiwin. I know this is supposed to be business, he interrupted. I know we agreed on boundaries. But I need you to know that every dinner, every event, every moment I've had my hands on you, I wasn't pretending. I've never been pretending. The space between them felt electric, dangerous. Then what are we doing? I don't know, he admitted. I've been in love with you for 3 years, and I've spent 6 months trying to keep this professional while touching you in ways I've dreamed about. I'm trying very hard to be honorable, Naomi, but I'm running out of discipline. She should have stepped back. Should have reinforced the boundaries. Instead, she leaned forward and kissed him. It was soft at first, tentative, a question. Then his hand slid into her hair, and the kiss deepened, became an answer. 3 years of tension, of longing, of midnight calls, and unspoken words poured into that moment. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he pressed his forehead to hers. This complicates things, she whispered. Everything about us is complicated. His thumb traced her jaw. But I'm done pretending I don't want you. I'm done protecting you from something you're choosing with open eyes. That night, he came upstairs. They didn't sleep. The 3rd month was a fever dream. They stopped pretending the engagement was fake. Stopped maintaining separate spaces. She spent nights at his penthouse, learning the sounds he made when she touched him, the way he whispered her name like a prayer. He was surprisingly tender. She'd expected intensity, and there was that, but also softness. The way he'd make her breakfast, remembering she liked her eggs scrambled with cheese. The way he'd read to her when she couldn't sleep, his voice turning poetry into lullabies. The way he'd hold her after nightmares she'd never told him about, somehow knowing when she needed silence versus when she needed distraction. Where did you learn to be like this? She'd asked one morning, tangled in his sheets, sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows. Like what? Gentle. You're supposed to be terrifying. He'd smiled against her shoulder. I am terrifying. To everyone but you. You make me want to be soft. But reality has a way of shattering beautiful illusions. The assassination attempt happened during a charity gala, one of those glittering soul events where old money mingled with new power. Naomi wore a dress Jaiwin had chosen, deep emerald silk that made her skin glow. They'd danced earlier, his hand possessive at her waist, and for once she'd let herself believe this could last beyond 6 months. They were leaving, walking toward his car, when Miho suddenly shoved them both sideways. The gunshot was deafeningly loud. Naomi hit the ground hard, Jaiwin's body covering hers, his weight pressing her into cold concrete. Around them, chaos erupted, screaming, running, more gunshots. His security detail returned fire with brutal efficiency. Stay down, Jaiwin commanded, his voice arctic. He pulled a gun from somewhere, of course he was armed, and fired twice without looking, trusting his instincts. Naomi's ears rang. Her elbow throbbed where she'd hit the pavement. But her training kicked in, old training she'd thought she'd buried years ago, and her hands moved automatically, checking Jaiwin for injuries, scanning for threats, calculating exits. The firefight lasted 90 seconds. When it ended, 3 attackers were dead, 2 of Jaiwin's guards were wounded, and Miho was calling for cleanup crews. Jaiwin pulled her to her feet, his hands shaking as he checked her face, her arms, her body. Are you hurt? Naomi, look at me, are you hurt? I'm fine. Her voice sounded distant. I'm fine. But he noticed. Noticed the way she'd moved during the attack. The way she'd scanned for threats. The way she hadn't screamed or panicked like a civilian attorney should have. In the car, speeding toward his safe house, he finally asked, "Who are you?" She closed her eyes. The secret she'd kept for 5 years, the past she'd buried under law degrees and professional success, was about to destroy everything. Before law school, she said quietly, "I worked for the FBI. Undercover operations, criminal enterprises. I was trained to infiltrate organizations, gather evidence, and facilitate takedowns from the inside." The silence was suffocating. That's why you knew how to move during the shooting. Why you checked sight lines instead of panicking. His voice was carefully neutral. That's why you learned Korean so fluently, why you understand criminal operations so instinctively. I left that life. I wasn't lying about law school, about my career. Were you sent to infiltrate me? The question was cold, precise. Is that what this is? 3 years of getting close, earning my trust, waiting for the moment to bring me down. No. She turned to face him. I left the FBI 5 years ago. I was done with that life, done with the lies. When I met you, I was just an attorney drowning in debt. Everything between us has been real. Has it? His jaw clenched. Or have you been playing a long game? The perfect cover, the attorney who falls in love with her criminal client, getting access to everything, everyone. You heard me confess my feelings before you ever offered this deal. You know that night was real. I didn't know you were listening. The car screeched to a stop. They'd arrived at the safe house, a minimalist apartment in an anonymous building. Inside, Jaiwon poured whiskey with shaking hands. I need you to tell me everything, he said. Every operation you worked, every organization you infiltrated, every reason I should or shouldn't trust you. So she told him. About joining the FBI at 22, idealistic and desperate to make a difference. About her first undercover operation, a drug trafficking ring in Miami that had ended with her mentor dead and her faith in the system shattered. About the second operation, the third, each one taking more pieces of her soul. I was good at it, she admitted. Too good. I could become whoever they needed me to be. But eventually, I couldn't remember who I really was. I'd lie to targets, then come home and lie to my family about where I'd been. I was drowning in deception. So you left. So I ran. Changed my name legally, buried my records, went to law school. I wanted to use the law to help people without destroying myself in the process. She met his eyes. When I met you, I saw someone who existed in the same moral gray area I'd lived in. Someone who did terrible things for complicated reasons. I understood you in a way most people couldn't. Is that why you fell in love with me? Because I reminded you of the criminals you used to hunt. I fell in love with you because you quoted poetry and remembered my coffee order. Because you protected my family without asking for anything in return. Because you looked at me like I was precious instead of useful. Her voice broke. I fell in love with you despite knowing exactly what you are, because I know what I am too. And I chose you anyway. Jaiwon downed his whiskey, poured another. The Jade Serpents. The attack tonight. Someone knows who you are. Or someone knows what I mean to you and wants to hurt you through me. He pulled out his phone, dialed. Miho. I need a full background check on tonight's attackers. I want to know who hired them, who they've worked with, and whether any federal agencies have touched their files in the last year. A pause. And pull our attorney's sealed records. All of them. I want to see what we're dealing with. When he hung up, Naomi felt something break inside her. You still don't trust me. I don't trust anyone who's lied about who they are. I didn't lie. I just didn't tell you about a past I've been trying to escape for 5 years. That's a distinction without a difference in my world. They stood on opposite sides of the room, the space between them suddenly vast. All the intimacy of the last 3 months, the touches, the confessions, the nights tangled together, felt like smoke dissolving. What happens now? She asked. Now we figure out who tried to kill us and why. The engagement continues publicly until we have answers. His voice was pure business. But privately, we're done. This was always going to end badly. Tonight just accelerated the timeline. It felt like a physical wound, sharp and deep. Jaiwon, you should sleep. We'll talk strategy in the morning. He walked out of the room, leaving her alone with the wreckage of everything they'd built. The answer came 3 days later. Miho's investigation revealed that the assassination attempt wasn't random. The shooters had been hired by a rival crime syndicate, but the order had come from someone inside Jaiwon's organization, someone who'd learned about Naomi's FBI past and decided to use it to destabilize Jaiwon's control. It's not about you, Miho explained during their emergency meeting. It's about him. Proving he's gone soft, that he's vulnerable because he fell in love. In our world, that's fatal. Naomi sat across from Jaiwon in his office, the same office where he'd offered her the fake engagement deal months ago. They'd barely spoken since the revelation, their interactions coldly professional. So what's the plan? She asked. We eliminate the threat, Jaiwon said flatly. Then you leave. Like we agreed. Just like that. Just like that. He wouldn't meet her eyes. Your brother's debt is cleared. He's in rehab in California, making good progress. The 6 months are almost up. You're free to go. She should have felt relieved. Instead, she felt hollow. But before she could respond, Miho's phone rang. His face went pale as he listened. It's your grandmother, he told Jaiwon. She's collapsed. The doctors say it's time. They rushed to the hospital, a private facility in Gangnam where his grandmother lay in a suite that looked more like a luxury hotel than a medical room. She was tiny in the hospital bed, her breathing labored, but her eyes were still sharp when she saw them enter. Come here, both of you, she rasped. Jaiwon knelt beside the bed, his face carefully blank. Naomi hung back, feeling like an intruder. Closer, girl. I don't have all day. The old woman's laugh turned into a cough. Naomi approached, and the grandmother grabbed both their hands, placing them together. I'm dying, so I'll be direct. You two are idiots. She squeezed their hands with surprising strength. Jaiwon, you think loving her makes you weak. Naomi, you think your past makes you unworthy. Both of you are wrong. Grandmother, Jaiwon started, but she cut him off. Listen, I've lived 87 years. I've seen men who chose power over love, and I've watched them die alone, hollow, with empires that crumbled the moment they stopped breathing. Your grandfather, he chose me over his family's dynasty. We built something smaller but real. And when he died happy, surrounded by people who loved him, not feared him. She looked at Jaiwon with fierce love. You have a chance at something real with this woman. She sees you, not your power, not your money, but you. Don't throw that away because you're afraid. Fear is what makes you human, not weak. Then to Naomi, and you, child. You think you need to be perfect to be loved. You think your past disqualifies you from happiness. But the best relationships aren't between perfect people. They're between two broken people who decide to heal each other. Tears slid down Naomi's face. I don't know if we can fix what's broken. Then you're not trying hard enough. The old woman's breathing grew more labored. Jaiwon, what do you want? Not what you think you should want, not what's strategic. What does your heart want? For a long moment, he was silent. Then, I want her. I've always wanted her. I'm just terrified that loving her will get her killed. And you, Naomi? I want him. Despite everything, despite the danger, despite the fact that it's complicated and messy and probably impossible, I want him. The grandmother smiled. Then stop being cowards and choose each other. Choose it every day. Fight for it. Because love isn't something you find once and keep forever. It's something you build, brick by brick, choice by choice. She died 3 hours later, surrounded by family, her hand still holding Jaiwon's. At the funeral, Naomi stood beside him in a black dress, the fake engagement ring still on her finger. His family bowed to her with new respect. His grandmother's final approval had changed their perception. After the ceremony, when the mourners had dispersed and they stood alone in the cemetery, Jaiwon finally spoke. She was right. I've been a coward. Naomi turned to face him. So have I. I don't care about your past. I care about your future. Our future. He took her hands. The engagement was supposed to be fake. But somewhere along the way, I started planning a real wedding. Started imagining you in my house permanently, not as a performance, but as my wife. Started thinking about what it would mean to build something legitimate, something that doesn't require bodyguards and weapons and constant fear. What are you saying? I'm saying let's leave. Together. I have money hidden in accounts my organization doesn't control. Enough to disappear, start over, build something clean. His voice was raw with hope and fear. I'm saying I choose you over power. I choose us over the empire my family built. I choose love over. Continue. 3:06 p.m. Control. Naomi's breath caught. You'd walk away from everything? I'd walk away from everything if it means walking toward you. She thought about his grandmother's words. About choice. About healing. About two broken people deciding to build something real. I have conditions, she said, echoing their first deal. Name them. First, we don't run. We transition. You dismantle the criminal operations, legitimize what can be legitimized, and let someone else take over what can't. We don't leave people in chaos, we leave them with structure. He nodded slowly. Agreed. Second, I go back to practicing law. Real law. helping people who can't fight the system alone. And you support that, even when it's inconvenient. Done. Third, we get married. For real this time. Not for your family, not for show, but because we choose each other every single day. His smile was sunlight breaking through storm clouds. That's not a condition. That's a gift. He pulled a different ring from his pocket, simple, elegant, a diamond that caught the light like captured stars. I bought this 3 months ago, when I admitted to myself that this was never fake. Will you marry me? For real this time. Naomi took off the black diamond ring, handed it back to him, and held out her left hand. Yes, for real this time. He slid the new ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly. Of course it did. They kissed in the cemetery, surrounded by the dead who'd taught them how to live. The law office Naomi opened in Itaewon wasn't fancy. No marble floors, no crystal chandeliers. Just a clean space with good lighting and comfortable chairs where people who couldn't afford representation could get help. Jaiwon's transition out of criminal operations had taken 8 months of careful negotiation. He'd sold territories, paid off debts, and transferred leadership to his cousin, someone ruthless enough to maintain order, but smart enough to know when to evolve. Now he ran a legitimate investment firm, using his understanding of underground economics to help businesses in underserved communities. It wasn't as powerful as ruling the criminal underworld, but he slept better, smiled more, looked at Naomi across the breakfast table every morning like she was magic. Kwame had completed rehab and was working as a software engineer in California, calling every Sunday to check in. Naomi's parents had visited Korea twice, her mother declaring Jaiwon acceptable after he learned to cook traditional Ghanaian dishes badly, but with enthusiasm. On their first wedding anniversary, they stood in the same garden where his grandmother had told Naomi not to let him push her away. "Do you miss it?" she asked. "The power." He pulled her close, his arms solid and safe around her. "I miss the simplicity sometimes. The clear hierarchy. But then I come home to you and I remember power is empty. This is real. We're really doing this. Building something legitimate, something good. We're really doing this." He kissed her forehead. Together. In the distance, 13 black roses bloomed in the garden his grandmother had planted years ago. One for each year he'd ruled the underworld before choosing something better. Before choosing love. Naomi thought about the journey that had brought them here, the accidental confession, the fake engagement, the assassination attempt, the secrets revealed. Every painful moment that had led to this garden, this man, this life they were building from the ruins of who they used to be. "I love you," she said. "I know." His smile was soft, real, hers. "You forgot to hang up." She laughed, remembering that night 3 years ago when exhaustion had cracked her carefully constructed walls, and she'd confessed everything to Marcus, not knowing the man she loved was listening. "Best mistake I ever made." "Second best," he corrected. The best was saying yes. They kissed as the sun set over Seoul, the city they'd both ruled in different ways, the city that had brought them together and nearly torn them apart. Somewhere in the house, Naomi's phone buzzed with a message from her newest client, a woman escaping an abusive relationship, needing legal protection. Work was calling. Life was calling. But for this moment, in this garden, with this man who'd chosen her over everything, Naomi Chinkang let herself simply be happy. And it was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything. If you made it to the end of this story, thank you so much for watching. Naomi and Jaiwon's journey from fake engagement to real love proves that sometimes the best relationships are built on honesty, even when the truth is complicated. Please don't forget to like this video if you love their story. Subscribe to Revenge Cafe for more Afro-Korean romance. Comment below telling me, what was your favorite moment? Should I do more stories about reformed criminals finding love? What kind of romance should I write next? Until next time, remember, love isn't about being perfect. It's about choosing each other every single day, despite the imperfections. See you in the next video. Heartsuit.